footage of Diddy.
I figure most journalists would not disclose their sources.
If Sean Combs watches this, what do you think he's going to feel?
Like, wow, this is amazing. I think he's going to say this is the best documentary I've seen in a long time. My favorite villain? I kind of like Diddy.
There are no misconceptions about it.
50
Everybody thought the Diddy documentary had already said enough. But now the conversation is taking an even more explosive turn. This time, the spotlight isn't just on Sean Diddy Combs. It's on Janice Combs, the woman many believe played a major role in shaping the man behind the empire. After reports that certain controversial footage never made it into the Netflix version, 50 Cent is now teasing what could be a much bigger reveal, and social media is already on fire. Janice has spoken out in defense of her son, but instead of calming things down, her statement has pushed even more people to ask difficult questions about Diddy's past, his rise to power, and the family dynamic that has always stayed just outside the spotlight. And with 50 Cent promising more, the real story may only be starting now. Everybody thought the first wave of documentaries had already said everything there was to say about Sean Diddy Combs, but now a new layer of the story is pulling people back in, and this time the spotlight is shifting toward Janice Combs. For years, most of the public conversation focused on Diddy himself, his music empire, his lifestyle, his business power, and the allegations that have surrounded his name. But now, with 50 Cent continuing to push this documentary conversation forward, more people are starting to ask a different question. If Diddy became the man the world came to know, then what kind of environment shaped him long before the fame, the money, and the headlines? And that question is exactly why Janice Combs is suddenly at the center of the discussion. What made this story hit even harder is the claim that there may be footage and commentary that never made it into the first major documentary release. According to the way this story is being framed online, some of the most controversial material was either left out or never fully explored, and 50 Cent is making it clear that he has no interest in keeping things quiet. That alone has been enough to send social media into overdrive, because whenever people hear that a documentary only told part of the story, they immediately start wondering what was too uncomfortable, too sensitive, or too explosive to include the first time around. At the same time, Janice Combs has publicly defended her son, and in many ways that was expected. A mother standing by her child is not shocking. In fact, to many people, that is the most predictable part of this entire situation. But instead of ending the conversation, her defense seems to have added fuel to it. Critics are now looking at her statement and saying it doesn't settle anything. If anything, it pushed more people to revisit old stories, old interviews, old rumors, and old footage, all in an attempt to better understand the family dynamic that has been discussed for years but never fully placed under the microscope. To understand why this angle is grabbing so much attention, you have to go back to Diddy's early years. According to people who have spoken publicly about that time, his childhood was shaped by loss, ambition, and a constant exposure to grown-up energy long before most children would even understand what they were looking at. After the death of Diddy's father, Janice Combs became the dominant force in the home. And from the outside looking in, she has often been described as a woman who was determined, stylish, socially connected, and deeply focused on building a future for her son. That image by itself would not be unusual. But what has made the story more controversial are the claims from people who say that the atmosphere inside that world was anything but ordinary. Several accounts that have circulated through documentaries, interviews, and commentary describe the Combs household as a place where important people came through, where parties were common, and where the line between family life and social theater may have been blurred. Some people allege that young Diddy was exposed very early to a world of status, image, performance, and adult behavior. And if those accounts are true, that matters because the script of Diddy's public life has always been tied to image control, influence, spectacle, and the ability to command attention. People are now asking whether the seeds of all of that were planted much earlier than the public realized. One of the most talked about parts of this broader discussion comes from stories told by people who say they knew Diddy or were around his circle during those early years. Tim Patterson's name has come up in this conversation because he described an environment that sounded larger than life and, in some cases, deeply troubling. According to those accounts, there were gatherings in the home, people moving in and out, and moments that left a strong impression on the children around them. Whether every detail can be verified or not, the larger picture being painted is one of a young boy growing up around performance, power, and adult behavior in a way that may have normalized things most people would see as extreme. And that's where 50 Cent's involvement changes the energy of the story. Because 50 Cent is not presenting this as a quiet, respectful look back at a complicated family history. He's pushing it like a major reveal. He knows exactly how to frame controversy for maximum attention, and he understands how to turn public curiosity into an event. When he signals that there is more footage, more context, or more uncomfortable material still waiting to be seen, he is doing more than promoting a documentary. He is telling the audience that the story they thought they understood may only be half the story. That message becomes even more powerful because Diddy and 50 Cent have such a long and public history of tension. So every time 50 Cent speaks on this situation, people immediately question the motive. Is this about truth? Is this about entertainment? Is this about rivalry? Or is it all three at once? That debate has become part of the appeal. Supporters of the documentary argue that difficult stories need to be told, even when they involve powerful people. Critics argue that personal history between public figures can blur the line between accountability and vendetta. But regardless of which side people take, the result is the same. The audience keeps watching. Then there's the role Janice Combs is said to have played not only in Diddy's personal life, but possibly in his business life as well. Reports and commentary around the documentary have suggested that she may have had a deeper influence behind the scenes than many outsiders realized. Some voices in the story claim that she was more than just a supportive parent. They describe her as someone who understood how to protect, guide, and sometimes structure key parts of the empire. If true, that would make her not just a family figure, but a major player in the entire bad boy narrative. That is one reason why people keep returning to the same question. How much did Janice Combs know, and how much influence did she truly have? Not everyone asking that question is making the same accusation, but the curiosity keeps growing because the public is no longer satisfied with surface-level answers. People want to know whether she was simply a mother defending her son, or whether she was also a gatekeeper, a strategist, and an active force behind how things were handled both privately and publicly. The conversation gets even more intense when old footage and public moments are brought back into the spotlight. In online commentary, clips showing Diddy and his mother together have been re-examined through a much more suspicious lens. What may once have been brushed off as eccentric celebrity behavior is now being treated by critics as evidence of a relationship they consider unusually close or symbolically revealing. That doesn't prove misconduct, but it does show how dramatically public interpretation can shift once a person's reputation is under pressure. When people believe they are watching a scandal unfold, they start reinterpreting everything from the past through that new lens. And that may be one of the biggest reasons this story has become so powerful. It's no longer just about one documentary or one statement. It's about revision. It's about the public going back and asking whether signs were always there, whether certain stories were ignored, whether people looked away because the brand was too powerful, or because the music and celebrity were too big to challenge at the time. Once that process starts, every old interview, every family moment, every insider claim, and every business detail takes on new meaning. What Janice Combs said in defense of her son may have been intended to shut the noise down, but instead it seems to have reopened the door. Now people are looking not only at Diddy's choices, but at the world around him, the people closest to him, and the foundation he came from. And as 50 Cent keeps teasing more footage, more context, and more confrontation, this story is no longer being framed as a completed chapter. It's being framed as the beginning of a much bigger one. The public has already seen the headlines. They've already heard the denials. But the question now is whether what comes next will change how people see Diddy's rise forever, or whether this is another example of controversy being amplified until it becomes entertainment on its own. Either way, one thing is clear. Janice Combs is no longer standing at the edge of this story. She is moving straight into the center of it, and that shift may change everything people thought they knew. As the conversation around Sean Diddy Combs keeps getting bigger, more people are starting to believe that the real story may not begin with the headlines the public sees today, but with the environment that surrounded him long before the cameras, the red carpets, and the empire. And that is exactly why Janice Combs has become such a major talking point in this entire discussion. Because once people begin asking how a public figure became who he is, they almost always start by looking at the home, the family influence, and the values that were formed behind closed doors. In Diddy's case, those questions are now being asked louder than ever, and every answer seems to open the door to even more controversy. For years, Janice Combs was mostly viewed from a distance as the mother of a music icon, a proud parent who stood beside her son as he built one of the most recognizable brands in entertainment. But now that old interviews, documentary footage, and online commentary are all being pulled back into the spotlight, the image people are looking at is no longer that simple. Now the public is hearing claims that Janice was not just the loving mother cheering from the sidelines, but a powerful presence inside the world that shaped Diddy's identity, his view of power, and the way he learned to move through life. Whether every claim can be proven or not, the reason this story is catching fire is because it taps into something people always find compelling: the idea that the roots of public controversy often begin in private life. One of the strongest themes in this whole narrative is the belief that Diddy was exposed at an early age to a culture of attention, status, performance, and adult behavior. The way this has been described by people connected to the story paints a picture of a household that did not feel ordinary. It felt active, social, influential, and in some versions of the story even chaotic. Guests coming through, gatherings happening, people performing, energy always moving. It all feeds into the idea that Diddy may have learned very early how much power there is in controlling a room. And when people connect that to the version of Diddy the world later got to know, charismatic, commanding, image-conscious, and obsessed with spectacle, they start to wonder if the pattern was set years before fame ever arrived. That is why so many viewers have been pulled into the claims involving what went on inside that home. Not necessarily because every allegation is proven, but because the picture being painted feels psychologically significant. When people hear that a child was raised around glamorous gatherings, powerful personalities, and behavior that blurred the line between normal family life and something much more intense, they start to form their own conclusions about how that child may grow up to view relationships, influence, and control. And in this case, critics are arguing that the seeds of Diddy's later public image may have been planted in exactly that kind of environment. At the center of all of this is the question of how much Janice Combs influenced the world her son eventually built. Some commentators describe her as a woman who knew how to survive, adapt, and protect what mattered to her. Others go further and suggest she understood the mechanics of power so well that her influence reached into far more than just family support. That is where the story becomes more than emotional, it becomes strategic. Because if Janice was deeply involved not only in Diddy's upbringing, but also in the mindset that later defined his empire, then people begin to see her not just as his mother, but as one of the architects of the system around him. And the more people hear that, the more they revisit the stories that have been floating around for years. Stories about the atmosphere in the household. Stories about parties. Stories about behavior that people around them considered unusual. Stories about a bond between mother and son that some observers have described as unusually intense. Again, these are claims and interpretations, not settled facts. But what makes them powerful in the public imagination is that they are now being assembled into one larger narrative. On their own, any one of those details might be brushed aside. Together, they create the feeling that there may have been a much deeper dynamic at work all along. That is also why 50 Cent's involvement has added so much momentum to the story. He understands how to take scattered controversy and turn it into a narrative people feel they need to follow. He knows how to frame a story not as old gossip, but as a reveal that still has another layer waiting underneath it. And when he hints that certain footage was left out, or that there are details the public has not fully seen yet, he's not just promoting content. He is telling viewers that what they think they know is incomplete. That message is incredibly powerful, especially in a moment when audiences are already suspicious of polished public narratives. What makes it even more intense is that Janice's public defense of her son has not stopped the conversation at all. In fact, to many people it has had the opposite effect. Because the moment she spoke out, the spotlight shifted more directly onto her. People began looking at her not simply as someone reacting to the controversy, but as someone who may have a much deeper connection to the story than they realized before. Her statement may have been meant to protect Diddy, but for critics it became another reason to dig deeper, revisit old material, and ask whether the family has been carefully managing this narrative for years. That suspicion grows even stronger when discussions turn from personal history to business structure. There has been a lot of talk around the idea that Janice Combs may have played a significant role behind the scenes in the financial and administrative side of Diddy's empire. Some voices suggest she was trusted not just emotionally, but strategically. They argue that certain arrangements, certain protections, and certain decisions may have reflected a much bigger level of involvement than the public ever understood. Whether those interpretations are accurate or not, the effect is the same. Janice stops looking like a background figure and starts looking like someone who may have been central to how the empire was built and protected. And once that thought enters the public conversation, it changes everything. Because now people are not only asking what Diddy did, what Diddy knew, or what Diddy was accused of. They're asking who was around him, who helped shape the systems around him, and who may have helped maintain those systems as the years went on. In that kind of environment, every old story begins to sound more important than it did before. Every rumor gets re-examined. Every clip gets replayed. Every family interaction is studied, as if it contains some hidden key to understanding the larger picture. Another reason this story keeps spreading is because it mixes celebrity scandal with something more emotionally charged: family influence. People are used to hearing about famous men accused of abuse, manipulation, or image control. But when the story expands to include the mother, the household, and the family structure itself, it starts to feel more layered and more unsettling. It invites the audience to stop looking at isolated incidents and start thinking in terms of culture, inheritance, and learned behavior. That makes the story feel larger than one person. It starts to feel like a system built over time, and that is exactly the kind of idea that keeps people talking. Then there's the emotional contradiction built right into Janice's public image. On one hand, many people see a mother doing what mothers do, defending her child no matter what. On the other hand, critics say that same loyalty can make the truth even harder to uncover, especially when it exists inside a powerful and wealthy family structure. That tension makes the story much more dramatic because there is no easy answer. Defending your son may look loving to some people and suspicious to others. And in a case this public, every act of protection can also be interpreted as an act of concealment, whether that's fair or not. As more people revisit the story, they are also paying attention to how carefully image has always been managed around Diddy. That's one of the biggest patterns people think they see now. They believe image was never just a byproduct of success, it was part of the strategy from the beginning. The style, the charisma, the confidence, the luxury, the relationships, the public moments, all of it may have been about more than celebrity branding. For critics, it was also about control. Control over perception, control over access, and control over how the public was meant to interpret the person behind the empire. And if that is true, then Janice's role in the early formation of that mindset becomes a much bigger story than people once assumed. What makes this moment feel different is that the public is no longer satisfied with simple denials or polished statements. People want details. They want timelines. They want context. They want to understand whether the version of Diddy they watched rise to the top was always hiding something darker beneath the surface, and whether the people closest to him saw far more than they ever admitted publicly. Janice Combs is now part of that conversation in a way she may never have been before, and once a person enters that kind of spotlight, every past connection suddenly matters. So as 50 Cent keeps pushing the story forward and the audience keeps digging through every old clip, every quote, and every allegation, one thing becomes clear. This is no longer just about Diddy as a celebrity. It's about the foundation beneath the celebrity. It's about the home, the influence, the relationships, and the structure that may have shaped everything that came later. And whether this next wave of revelations changes public opinion permanently or simply fuels another round of controversy, Janice Combs is now inseparable from the larger narrative. The public isn't just asking who Diddy became. They're asking who helped create the world that made him possible. What makes this story even more intense now is that it's no longer just about old allegations, old footage, or even old relationships. It's about a growing battle over who gets to control the final version of the Diddy narrative. For years, Sean Diddy Combs built an image that was larger than life. He wasn't just a music mogul. He was a brand, a lifestyle, a symbol of power, luxury, and influence. He knew how to command attention, how to shape a moment, and how to stay at the center of the conversation. But now that the public is re-examining everything through a very different lens, that same talent for controlling the narrative is being viewed with suspicion. People are starting to ask whether the image was always designed to distract from what was happening behind the scenes, and whether the people closest to him, especially Janice Combs, played a role in protecting that image for years. That is why the documentary war itself has become part of the story. On one side, you have 50 Cent continuing to push a version of events that promises more revelations, more missing context, and more uncomfortable truths. On the other side, you have Diddy's camp reportedly fighting back, arguing that the project is misleading, defamatory, and built to damage reputations rather than clarify facts. That clash is exactly what keeps the audience locked in, because once two powerful sides start battling over the story itself, the public starts to believe there must be something significant at stake. If there were nothing to hide, some people argue, then why fight so hard? But others push back and say that public scandal doesn't cancel the need for fairness, evidence, and due process. And that tension is what makes this entire situation so explosive. The more this unfolds, the clearer it becomes that Diddy's image was never just personal. It was institutional. It involved family, business, influence, and media strategy all working together. That is where Janice Combs becomes impossible to ignore. The conversation has evolved far beyond the idea of a mother simply loving and defending her son. Critics now believe her role may have extended into the very structure of how things were shielded, how decisions were made, and how power was managed around the bad boy empire. Even the suggestion of that is enough to deepen public suspicion, because when family and business overlap at the highest level, people naturally start to question whether loyalty replaced accountability. Then there's the issue of how old moments are being reinterpreted. Videos, interviews, public interactions, and family footage that once may have seemed harmless or eccentric are now being watched frame by a much more skeptical audience. That's one of the most dramatic things that happens in a scandal of this scale. The past doesn't stay in the past. Suddenly everything gets reopened. Every joke sounds different. Every public appearance looks more calculated. Every affectionate moment is examined for subtext. And in this case, the bond between Diddy and Janice has become one of the most discussed parts of that re-examination. What some once saw as celebrity family closeness, others now see as part of a much bigger pattern they believe was always there, just hiding in plain sight. At the same time, a whole new layer has been added by the involvement of Diddy's sons. That may be one of the most revealing parts of where this story is going next. Because when a public figure's children step into the media fight, the narrative stops being only about past allegations and starts becoming a struggle over legacy. Reports of Justin and Christian Combs being connected to a new docuseries have caused a strong reaction online, not because audiences are surprised that family members want to defend their father, but because many people see it as an attempt to reshape public emotion before the legal and cultural fallout is fully settled. To critics, it feels less like a family telling its truth and more like an image repair operation being launched in real time. That perception became even stronger because many viewers already believe Diddy has always understood the value of using public content to steer opinion. If that pattern is real, then a family-centered series featuring his sons doesn't look random at all. It looks strategic. It looks like another chapter in a much longer effort to frame events from the inside before outside voices define them permanently. And for a public that is already deeply suspicious, that kind of move can easily backfire. Instead of softening the image, it can reinforce the very idea people are worried about. That narrative control has always been part of the machine. This is also why 50 Cent's response matters so much. He doesn't just criticize, he amplifies. He knows exactly how to weaponize public curiosity, and he understands that in the age of social media, attention itself is power. By reposting, reacting, teasing, and framing the family's moves as suspicious or poorly timed, he keeps the audience looking at every development through a lens of doubt. He turns every new release into part of the same larger argument, that what the public is seeing now is not random damage control, but a continuation of an old system built to manage appearances. Whether people believe him completely or not, his commentary keeps shaping how the story is consumed. And the timing makes it even more dramatic. As the public waits to see what more could be revealed in future documentary content, every fresh headline starts to feel connected. Legal pushback, old footage, family statements, media appearances, reports of unreleased material, even projects involving Diddy's sons. It all begins to merge into one giant public puzzle. That's what makes this case so different from ordinary celebrity scandal. It doesn't feel isolated, feels layered, feels generational. It feels like people aren't just investigating an individual, but a whole ecosystem of influence that may have protected itself for years through status, wealth, and carefully managed perception. Another major reason this story keeps growing is because it touches something bigger than celebrity. It touches power and how power behaves when threatened. Audiences are fascinated by what happens when a person who once seemed untouchable is suddenly forced into defense mode. They want to know who stays loyal, who starts talking, who distances themselves, and who steps forward to control the story. Janice Combs defending her son, Diddy's sons appearing ready to tell their side, and 50 Cent positioning himself as the relentless outside force all create the feeling of a larger battle being fought in public. It's not just about facts anymore. It's about who the audience chooses to believe and why. There's also something emotionally complicated happening underneath all of this. Because no matter how controversial the allegations become, people still understand the instinct of family protection. A mother standing by her son, children standing by their father, those are human reactions. But in a scandal this serious, those same acts of loyalty are interpreted in very different ways depending on who is watching. To supporters, it may look like love. To critics, it may look like denial. To the public, it becomes one more piece of a narrative they're trying to decode. That ambiguity keeps the story alive because it prevents easy closure. There are no clean lines here, only competing interpretations. And that is exactly why the Janice Combs angle has become so powerful. She represents more than a person in this story. She represents origin, influence, and possible protection. If Diddy was the face of the empire, many people now believe Janice may have been part of the foundation under it. That doesn't mean every allegation is automatically true, but it does explain why public interest keeps intensifying. Once audiences believe they are no longer looking at just a celebrity scandal, but at the roots of a whole system, they stop seeing background figures as background figures. Everyone becomes relevant. Everyone becomes part of the question. What happens next may depend less on one big reveal and more on how the public continues piecing together old and new information. Future footage, more interviews, more legal developments, more media projects, and more commentary could all reshape the picture again. But one thing seems certain. The story has moved beyond the stage where simple statements can shut it down. The audience wants a deeper explanation now. They want to understand how the public image was built, how the private world operated, and whether the people inside that world were simply bystanders or active participants in protecting what the world saw. So as this narrative keeps unfolding, Janice Combs is no longer a distant name connected to Diddy's past. She has become one of the central figures in the public effort to understand his rise, his environment, and the network of loyalty that surrounded him. 50 Cent appears determined to keep pressing that point. Diddy's supporters seem equally determined to push back, and the audience is left watching a battle over legacy play out in real time. In the end, this may be about more than one documentary, one family, or one celebrity empire. It may be about what happens when the image that once looked untouchable starts to crack, and the people standing closest to it suddenly find themselves pulled into the center of the storm. So what do you think? Is this just another wave of internet speculation? Or are we finally starting to see the deeper story behind Sean Diddy Combs, Janice Combs, and the empire that was built around them? As more footage surfaces and more voices begin to speak out, the questions only keep getting bigger. And if 50 Cent really does release the material that was allegedly left out, this entire conversation could shift again in a major way. Drop your opinion in the comments right now because this story is far from over, and I want to know exactly where you stand. Do you believe Janice Combs was simply a mother protecting her